And welcome to the May 24th meeting of the Westborough Planning Board. We have a busy agenda tonight. I will read that first, although we will not necessarily go in this order in an attempt to accommodate other people's schedules. We have a continuation of a public hearing for a site plan review application at 155 Oak Street. We have a continuation of public hearing for site plan review application 2529 Research Drive. We have a public hearing for an amendment to the West Park Drive Extension Definitive Subdivision Special Permit number 2021-1. We have introduction of Economic Development Coordinator and update on current initiatives. That's with Zach Wagner. Zach, you'll have to make sure I pronounce it right. I got the Zach part. Vote to approve the master plan implementation scope of work contract from VHB and a CMRPC Community Resilience Planning Award, and then a couple other continued business discussions on the Housing Choice Act, Master Plan Implementation Committee. We have an A&R as well. So I know Zach has to be over at the Selectmen's meeting. So Zach, I would like to introduce you to the Planning Board, and I know you have some exciting news for us. So,
is it best for me to sit here?
Have a seat. It's probably more comfortable.
Totally. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the Planning Board for inviting me to introduce myself and share some of the exciting work the EDC is doing. I'd love to, make this a more regular occurrence so that we can make sure that we are in partnership as we move forward on economic development issues for the town of Westborough. I'm actually here for two reasons. First, I'll provide an update, and then second, I will be asking for a letter of support for the EDC's application to the fiscal year 23 Community One Stop for Growth portal for an application to the Massachusetts Downtown Initiative to fund technical assistance for wayfinding design. So I'll share a little bit of an update about some upcoming businesses, some recently opened businesses, a few recent events, as well as some ongoing projects. Regarding upcoming businesses, you might have seen Jersey Mike's has a sign up at 9 West Plaza, and that project is moving along, and we expect them to open soon. There is a liquor store that is interested in moving into West Meadow Plaza, and I believe that they have applied to the Select Board for a liquor license for that location. Rockland Trust, which is across the street from Westborough Shopping Center, I believe at the old Bank of America site, should be opening in the next week or two. And they actually will be having a ribbon cutting with the Corridor 9 495 Chamber of Commerce on Thursday, May 26th from 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. You are all welcome to come and attend and welcome a new business to town if you would like. Additionally, we have a couple exciting small businesses coming to our downtown area. Specifically at 25 West Main, Cha-Cha and Beans, which actually received a grant from the Economic Development Committee's Business Assistance Grant Program, will be opening there to the left when facing the building of Nemizo Learning Labs, which is another new business downtown. Cha-Cha and Beans is a unique business in that they are a boba tea shop. This is something that in the master plan, actually, I believe a lot of the high school students that had participated expressed a lot of interest in having in our community. So we're really excited to see our downtown area specifically attract a use like that that's going to do a lot of business with our youth population. Additionally, the Coop is moving along at 30-32 West Main Street, and we expect them to open in the next few months as well. Regarding our ongoing projects and recent events, as some of you might know, we hosted a successful Year in Review Award celebration right here in this room, recognizing 6 Westborough businesses for various achievements over the past 2 years in the COVID-19 pandemic. The Corridor 9 495 Chamber of Commerce also hosted their annual meeting, actually last Thursday on May 19th, and they recognized multiple Westborough businesses with awards at that event as well, namely Coughlin Companies on Otis Street. Regarding some of our ongoing projects, the EDC at its last meeting recommended to the Select Board that Westborough opt into Mass Development's PACE program. We're really excited to add another piece to our economic development toolkit, especially one that can be targeted at larger projects and larger businesses that will hopefully lead to more clean energy improvements in our community. We are working on a community one-stop for growth application to the MDI program for wayfinding design. We're working with an IT vendor right now to design and implement an online business directory, which should be part of a larger Shop Local and Shop Westborough campaign. We have created a draft outdoor dining retail policy, which is the reason why I need to bolt over to the select board in a few minutes because they are considering adoption at their meeting tonight. We are hosting an info session actually tomorrow at 5 p.m. in this room on upcoming changes to the plastic bag reduction bylaw that were passed at this March's town meeting. We have created a rubric for the EDC's Business Assistance Grant Program, which has gotten significantly more competitive over the last year as we've increased our marketing for that program. And so the idea is that hopefully the rubric will help guide the EDC in its decision-making when determining who to give awards to in a competitive process. We're also working on refining the application to ask more questions that are more valuable to the committee, as well as working to host the application on Permit Pro, which is where our online permitting system for building, conservation, and fire permits. That's a little bit of an overview, and I apologize if I've been kind of quick through all that, as I'm eager to get across the street and hopefully see our outdoor dining and retail policy be adopted. But do any of you have any questions for me, or is there anything that I might be able to provide updates on as well?
Zach, I just would like you to come to more meetings. I think what you just provided is a great piece of knowledge for us in working to do our job. So please come to more meetings.
I try to listen in, when I'm in my office, but I'll try and make a point of coming more frequently. And at the very least, maybe once a month or whatever cadence feels right, I'd be happy to provide Jim with, a list of talking points about the status of our ongoing projects, initiatives, and any other updates that might be useful to you.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I think once a month we get some sort of an update, either you personally or something you've given to Jim that he can hand out to us would be very valuable.
Great.
Yeah, we don't need you in every meeting, but it's really nice to know what's coming in, what you're working on, and gives us an idea of what we might need to do too. So. Jim, did you have anything?
No, I was just going to let Zach proceed to request.
Yeah,
Right,
Zach,
which
go
is
ahead.
the other reason why I'm here is one of our local rapid recovery planning projects, as well as several other key planning documents, such as the master plan and the 2019-2020 downtown parking study, have recommended improved wayfinding signage, specifically for our downtown area to help attract more visitors and allow for people who are less familiar with our downtown area to realize that Westborough has a very vibrant, historic commercial center right here, just a half mile off of Route 9. And so we are pursuing this LRP project through the Mass Downtown Initiative Program, which typically provides grants of up to $25,000 to work with a designer to help create a sign family of what some of these signs might look like with a unified brand, as well as help us think through where we might put some of these signs and what information we might include on them. I think obviously in response to the parking study, which was conducted by CMRPC, helping people navigate our downtown area and especially find underutilized parking is something that we will really want to include in that wayfinding project. And so the application is due next Friday, June 3rd. I'm hoping to have all of the letters of support that I'm asking for signed by June 1st so that I have time to collate the application. But we're really excited about this project, and we think it's going to help reorient the customer base of our downtown area as we move into a post-COVID world.
So I know we all had a draft copy of that letter of support. Does anybody have any questions, comments, edits?
No, I think it looks good. And also, I'd just like to point out to the board that Zach made his presentation on the design review board this past week, and we all unanimously supported it. Right. So I just wanted the board to be aware of that. We're definitely in favor of this, and we will be consulted as the design review board as to how the signs look and the type and how they're done.
Draft, go ahead. Yep.
So I'd like to move that the planning board send a letter of support for the town's downtown capacity initiative grant application.
Second.
Okay, any discussion of the motion? All those in favor? That is 5-0 in favor. Thank you so much for coming in, Zach. Good luck across the street.
Thank you.
Let us know if there's anything we can help you with.
Thank you, and I'll make more of a habit of attending these meetings in person.
So, as a courtesy to VHB, we'll move that up, discussion up the agenda for the master plan implementation scope of work contract. This should go quickly, so I appreciate your patience for everyone waiting. Donnie, just name and title for the record, please.
All right, Donnie Goris-Kolb with VHB, Senior Sustainability Planner.
Donnie's here. We all got a draft of the contract. Hopefully had a chance to review it. Donnie's going to give us a brief summary of what the Master Plan Implementation Committee will be doing and what town officials' responsibilities are, as well as what their involvement will be. I'll just turn it over to you, Donnie. Go ahead.
Sure. So it's my understanding that the board has some questions about the composition of the implementation committee. Typically, an implementation committee, well, it does vary from town to town. It really is what suits the individual.
Could you just lift the microphone a little bit? Yeah,
sure. Is that better?
Yeah, much better. Thanks.
Yeah. So implementation committees and the composition of those committees varies from town to town. It does depend on what suits the individual community. What I have seen is that it does sort of mimic the master plan committee in that it has broad representation. We have to go back to the master plan, realize that there's an implementation component to that, and that implementation component has a number of roles and responsibilities. And it's the recommendation that the committee make up and represent those roles and responsibilities, because it is more of a collaborative effort. These individuals who are going to be leading the implementation of the actions identified in the master plan really need to be speaking to each other during the process and not focusing on their discrete swim lanes, the actions that they're solely responsible for. So having folks in the room communicating on the planning of the implementation, the phasing of the implementation is highly advisable. And additionally, you want some community representation on the board as well, or on the implementation committee, in that, you know, there's a little bit of connection to the community, which is a town and community-owned plan, and that there's a bit of transparency and there's a bit of accountability managed on the part of the community. So in effect, you're really recreating, you know, a semblance of the master plan committee in the implementation committee, just focusing more so on who's going to be, you know, having their hands, you know, getting it dirty, so to speak, implementing the actions moving forward.
So I think this is a good time to bring up, on June 28th, we have tentatively scheduled a meeting with the select board, and you know, this may be the first you've heard of it, to hopefully appoint your Tim Kaler's successor, because Tim is, unfortunately, needs to resign. And I'm just wondering if it might be something we could at least figure out how many at-large spots on this committee we would have, and we could get those posted so that maybe we could kill two birds with one stone at that meeting with the select board. I know we're maybe a little premature on, I think one of our homework after this meeting was to try and figure out, you know, what our ideal committee would be, and then next meeting come back and actually form that implementation committee. But are we ready to discuss? Maybe we could save that. I just want to give it enough posting time so that interested people will have an opportunity to respond.
I think we probably should save it, but I do have some comments. One of my problems with the master plan committee is I don't think we had enough community representation. And I feel very strongly that this master plan implementation committee should be weighted towards community members, not towards department heads and town employees, because I think it's so important to get community people involved in this. And as I go back to my original statement, I really felt that there was not enough community representation on the master plan committee. I think it made sense from the way we did the master plan, because we had people with the knowledge of the various communities, I mean, about the various parts that we were looking at. So we had more expertise in particular areas. But I do feel that we need more community representation on this committee and less town employees and people that are working, well, even committee, board members and so forth, and that we might work it out more in a liaison type of thing than have them as actual members of the committee. So that's kind of my general comment on the composition of the committee.
So they have a similar setup in Northborough, actually, where they have the implementation committee is largely composed of community members, and the planning department and the DPW are serving as liaisons, going to the implementation committee meetings, serving as guides to inform, what projects have taken place, what projects are in the pipeline, what it would take, and who they need to speak to move things forward. So that's another option that could be on the table.
Question.
Tim, go ahead.
So Donnie, just above the composition of the committee, I'm interested in your kind of breadth of experience in terms of what other communities have done. The master plan contains a number of specific plans and objectives, even some measurable ones that are sort of captured in a moment in time. But I think the master plan also is intended to serve the community for a decade at least or more. Mm-hmm. And having some involvement now, it's almost as though it serves as a strategic direction. It contains some principles that should help future leaders balance the dialectic of development versus open space, for example. Mm-hmm. So getting to the question, I'm concerned that there's the right influence on the governance of the town so that the master plan continues to live and breathe as our hardworking town departments, are really slogging day to day to meet budget and, kind of in the trenches. So with respect to what Hazel said, I appreciate members of the community being on the outside. I'm concerned about execution, frankly, across government. And I'm curious if, in your experience, how the composition or what other communities might have done to address that, versus the checklist of what have we done and what have we not done. What are the priorities? How are we going to influence future decisions that may not even have been known at this time?
Yeah, so I think I'm understanding your question correctly. So you're worried about the execution and how that's actually going to take place, and where the interface is with the governance is.
Well, where we've moved from, we documented it now. We went through a long process. It had the representation. I think it's a fine document. Implementation connotes taking action.
Well, I think the master plan serves, two roles. One is that implementation that we're speaking of and that the committee will be taking on, and two, serves as that strategic guide. So we have the vision, we have the sets of goals within the master plan, and all of the different boards, all of the different departments during major decision making should be referring back to the master plan and saying, this is what the community, wanted. This is how they envisioned Westborough to be in, at this time or, in 2030, which I think is the end date of your master plan. So there's sort of a directive that needs to be stated across all of the departments at the administrative level, I believe, to say that the master plan is that guide. And when it comes to the implementation and the checking everything off your list, that's what the committee is really set up to do. The committee is really, their major task is to make sure that implementation is moving forward and the plan isn't just sitting on the desk. So that's why we get staff involved. This is why we get those folks that have a hand in implementation involved as well. But as Hazel noted, community members can really serve as that force for accountability to make sure that things are getting done. A committee member can lead. A community member can lead the committee in the process. To assure that accountability and also assure transparency in the process too, because they can serve as liaisons back to the community itself, reporting back to neighborhood groups and whatnot. So, my answer to that question is twofold. One, it's a directive, and then two is the committee itself is tasked to really guide the process of execution.
So it's functionally, its role is oversight and accountability.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but just to clarify, the committee itself, needs to set its mission and its roles and responsibilities. So it may want to have its hand in actualizing or implementing certain actions. or it may just want to make sure that those that are better suited to take on that role are doing so in a fashion that's consistent with the overall plan for phasing and for that execution.
So there's no defined mission really for that committee? It's something that they would define themselves once they're formed?
To some extent. If you look at mission statements of different implementation committees, they do vary a little bit, but overall, it's really that oversight, making sure that, you know, the plan is getting implemented in the short, medium, and long term.
And we had over 30 people on the master plan committee.
Quite large.
In your experience, is there I don't want to say an ideal size, but an ideal range of size? There's such a thing as too many, too few?
Well, yes.
30 is too many, I think.
There's always too
Sure, that's
defined
true, but,
too many limit. But yeah, 15 is probably on average what committees is
That's even more
composed
than I
of.
was expecting, so, okay.
Yeah.
I think there's a balance between efficiency and making sure all the stakeholders feel like they have a voice on that committee. And, you know, everybody wants a part of it, but
Yeah.
in the interest of efficiency, I'm not sure that 15 to 20 people might be too many people.
Yeah, and again, that's on average. So if you want to go lower than that, you know, other communities have done so. You just, in the end, I've seen communities have a few people on the committee and responsibilities for, you know, advancing the mission fall on a few shoulders when some folks tend to do less than others.
All right, any other questions?
I have a couple. So is it possible for you to provide the composition of these committees that you've worked with before?
Sure.
Yeah, just so I can kind of filter, see who lines up. And then also, the master plan's a 15-year plan. Mm-hmm. So how long do you usually have people on these committees? How do you cycle people through? Because, you know, a 15-year term's a long term.
Yeah, it's a cycle term. There's appointments, and I'm not quite sure how it works in Westborough, but there are expirations.
We'd probably stagger the appointments, Pete, so we'd probably, ask for one representative, say, from the planning board, one at-large seats. Let's say there's 3, we'd probably have one start with 1 year and then 2.
Yeah, no, it all makes sense. Yeah. Thank you, Donnie. That's all.
I could send the compositions of different communities and what that looks like, but each community's master plan has an implementation component that has a different, breadth of and list of inclusions in terms of who's going to be responsible for implementation. Generally, I mean, they fall in line. I mean, there's the DPW, there's the planning board, there's the planning department, there's the conservation commission. But we should definitely take a look at the master plan itself, your master plan, to see who has prominent roles.
Thank you.
No other question?
Woody?
No, just a little bit of information about how we did this last time. The last time the implementation committee was made up of the entire planning board and 5 members at large, as well as a representative of the selectmen and the DPW director, and that committee lasted for 3 years. And there weren't any staggered terms. It was just that group for 3 years.
All right. All right, so we have a contract with VHB to approve or not approve, I guess. Have you all had a chance to review it? Draft motion? Go ahead.
I thought we approved it, didn't we? I mean,
The formal contract.
Okay.
You approved having VHB as your consultant and for Donnie to draft the contract, which is what he did.
Oh, okay. Do you want a motion just to approve the contract as written?
Yes.
All right. I move that the contract between the town and VHB dated May 6, 2022, for Westborough Master Plan implementation support be approved by the planning board.
Let's second that.
Discussion of that motion? Okay. All those in favor? 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donnie.
Thanks,
I
Donnie.
can't tell you how excited I am to get this process started. It
Great.
feels like it's taken too long already, and I just would like to make some progress at our next meeting on actually forming that committee. So if everybody can come in with their ideas and expectations, I'd really like to actually make that happen and possibly, like I said, get that get those appointments done at the June 28th Select Board meeting, if we can make it work. I want to give ample time for a posting so that people can get involved.
Yeah, Donnie's list will help, it definitely help, so thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right.
Donnie, if you can get me that list of other towns, and you and I can talk on the phone, we'll distill that and distribute it to the planning board.
Sure thing.
Great, thank you.
So if you don't mind, and I appreciate everyone's
Thanks,
patience.
Donnie.
I would like to discuss our June schedule briefly, because we may have to continue some hearings, and I want to make sure that we continue them to the right date. We currently have meetings scheduled on June 7th and June 21st. We also have been asked to meet with the board, the Select Board, on June 28th for a joint meeting to appoint Tim's replacement, which was just advertised on Friday, I believe. So if anybody's interested in serving out the 1 year till the next election on the planning board, at which point there will be, I guess, a special election for the remaining 2 years of Tim's term. So if anyone's interested in that, please submit a letter to the Selectman's office, Town Manager's office, I'm sorry, and you'll be considered for an appointment to the planning board through March. Since we are having a meeting with them on the 28th.
Mark, can I just interrupt and ask you one question?
Go ahead.
How will this be advertised? I mean, will there be something that will be posted somewhere?
Website,
Okay,
and I believe they're making an announcement at their meeting tonight.
fine. Thank you. That's all I was trying to find out.
Since we are meeting with them on the 28th, and since I will be away on the 21st, I was hoping that the board would consider moving our second meeting in June to the 28th, so that we didn't have to do 3 meetings in June, and so that I could be, so that I could attend the second meeting, since we will be short a member for that meeting. I'm concerned about quorum, and I will not be able to attend remotely. I don't know if everybody wants to look at their calendar and tell me if they can do the 28th.
I already have to be here the 20th, so I'm in. I have to, so, yeah, I'm fine.
Hazel, are you?
I think so. How is that going to work if we're having a joint meeting with the,
We'll have a joint meeting at, I believe they start at 6.
they start at 6:30?
They start at 6:30.
Right. And then where will we hold our regular meeting? I mean,
We'll open the meeting with them, and then come back here and do our regular
all
meeting.
right, okay.
Seven.
If you don't mind, what I would do is I would request the selectmen have us on the agenda first so that we could then adjourn to hear and reopen the meeting.
Okay, fine. I just want to make sure that logistics are such that people are aware of the fact that actually our meeting wouldn't start till close to 7.
In the past, they've posted their meeting a little early so that we, I don't know if they would do that for this, but
Sometimes 6:15, actually.
yeah, so if we were able to do that, we would, I don't think it'll take, we'll have to see how much interest there is. If there's a lot of interest, it could take 45 minutes to,
And then obviously it'll depend on how much we have our own agenda.
right.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it can wait. The 28th is fine. We need to work out the logistics so that people are aware of having to do this.
The only reason I say that is if there's only 3 people here on the 21st.
The 28th is fine with me. I don't have a problem with that.
All right. So with that being said, let's move on to the next agenda item, and we'll have our second meeting in June on the 28th.
So the first one's on the, what is it, the 4th?
7th.
7th.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a continuation of the public hearing for the site plan review application, 151, 155 Oak Street. And Mark, just introduce yourself again and whoever's with you, please.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Mark Donahue on behalf of Spectrum Health Systems, Inc. With me is Randy Myron from Bowler Engineering, the designer, engineers for the project. When we were here the first time,
that would need to go up to the lectern.
Go ahead, Mark.
The materials had been submitted. We were awaiting a review letter from Ty and Bond. That came in on May 19th. Mr. Myron has had an opportunity to speak with them and also with the town engineer. As to the plan itself, there don't seem to be any significant impediments to making revisions. I can have Mr. Myron review some of those changes if you so desire. Our intention would be to distill those proposed conditions, which are set forth in the Ty and Bond letter, into a further response by Bowler, which, if it's the will of this board, could be adopted essentially as a condition of approval that the plans be adopted or modified in that fashion prior to commencement of construction. So as to the plans itself, that's kind of where we are, and we're glad to discuss that. There is something of an open issue with regard to some off-site work. I'll remind the board that our plan reflects a sidewalk along the frontage of Spectrum between the two driveways, as noted. That's already part of the plan. Either at this board, at the Board of Selectmen, or independently from DPW, we've heard suggestions of off-site improvements. There seems to be some need for further discussion within town officials as to what the priority should be. So our suggestion would be, so that we might obtain site plan approval and get on a schedule for construction, would be to monetize that, by which the Spectrum would make a cash contribution to the town, which could then be allocated among the departments for whatever off-site improvements they decide are more appropriate than others after whatever consultation happens between various boards.
Okay. So ultimately, the planning board would make a decision on what off-site improvements are necessary. And, I think we've discussed streetlights, a crosswalk, and sidewalks, and I'm just not clear what other improvements you're referencing.
Well, there's two issues, I think, Mr. Chairman, is the discussions with DPW have expressed some concerns about those items and have suggested that they would rather not have the ongoing responsibilities for those, and rather would see as a priority a milling of Oak Street in the area to improve the surface. I would remind the board that there's no work proposed within the right-of-way by Spectrum as part of that, so we usually wouldn't be within the right-of-way for doing that. It would be, with all due respect, I think, unfair to the applicant to have to pay for all of those various off-site improvements, but we're willing to contribute and let either the board or the Board of Selectmen or DPW work out where those funds get spent.
Yeah, so my concern there, though, is that whatever the applicant doesn't do, it will ultimately become the town's responsibility at significantly higher cost. I'm just not clear, for example, a sidewalk. If you were to reimburse the town for the cost of a sidewalk, would it be at the cost to the town or the cost to the applicant? Because it's...
Certainly, sorry to interrupt. The sidewalk is somewhat separate and distinct because we showed it on our plan to construct it in all cases, so that's really not part of it. It's more what we had suggested, for example, with the lighting, was a contribution by which it would then be installed and obviously maintained by the town. There seems to be some reticence in that. I'm not trying to speak for others. They can speak for themselves.
No, I'm just not clear. Are you suggesting that the town go out and get a bid and then you'll reimburse us for the cost of that bid? Or how are we going to determine that amount?
What we were simply going to do is put a price tag on it and let the town spend a certain amount of money without trying to get to belabor the site plan.
I have to say, I'm not really in favor of this, doing it that way. I mean, I feel that there are off-site improvements which we're looking at, like street lighting and things like that, that the applicant should be doing those, because I think putting the onus on the town to have to go ahead and do this, I mean, just, we never know what costs are going to be, and I think that it's something that benefits your property. I mean, that the street lighting we're talking about is really along the area where Spectrum is. I mean, we're not asking you to put street lights all the way down to Milk Street. I mean, we're asking just for some in your particular area, the same with crosswalks. Those are really for the benefit of Spectrum. And so I really don't like the idea of, you giving the town money and then the town having to deal with this.
But
I like to see them constructed by the applicant.
Well, two different things.
So can I just expand on that too? Because, most of the time when we accept a, monetary contribution like that, we're actually getting a tax benefit from the project that would be put towards future improvements like the road, like maintenance of the sidewalks and curbs and so on. And I just haven't really heard the resolution on that yet. So it's really hard for me to support a solution with a fixed number when we don't know what it'll actually cost the town, and then not have any tax revenue to make up the difference, if there is a difference between what your contribution amount is and what the actual cost is. That will have to come out of citizens' pockets and not.
With your permission, let me clarify the position of the applicant if I've confused you. What we stated in the first meeting is that we were prepared to pay for the capital equipment for the lights. The poles are not Spectrums, and the obligation to maintain lights over the public way ultimately needs to be the town's. But we were prepared to acquire the capital equipment to do that, and therefore then have the town install it. We're still prepared to do that. The discussions have indicated that other town departments would prefer some other work, and we're open to that also. But if the concern is that the board wants to see the lights, we stand by our original commitment to acquire the capital equipment for that purpose.
Any other comments?
I'd just like to see what the DPW had to say about that. I mean,
Exactly.
Yeah.
that would be my,
It doesn't make sense.
that, and I also, the sidewalks seem to be an open question at the moment, and the crosswalks.
Well, I think it's not, I think it's the extent of the sidewalks might be still an open question. I'm not really clear whether that's true or not.
And I didn't think,
But the lights are for the safety of the
right, I
But
don't,
also
inpatient residents there, not for work on the other parts of town.
I think there's a question of resurfacing Oak Street as well. There's a question of the crosswalk. There's a lot of open questions there that I'm not sure what the resolution
The
is.
DPW then come and
Yeah,
report on this project.
all right. I think that,
I agree.
all right. Jim, comments?
I don't want to put anyone on the spot here. You have the assistant town engineer in the audience. Joe may wish to comment on this. All of these issues have been on the table before, so that's not news to the applicant. But if you want DPW to comment on that, I don't have anything in writing at this point.
I don't
Joe,
want
do
to
you
put
wanna
him on the
comment on
spot
that?
either. Do you feel comfortable commenting now, or do you want to do a formal Okay, all right. So I guess, in the past, I certainly would wait what DPW and engineering, what their recommendation would be in this case. So I would hope that you could come to some kind of resolution with them before we have to
approve the site plan.
Before we have to approve the site plan. Well said. Okay.
If I could, in fairness to the applicant, I've spoken with Mark about this, and Mark and I talked, and I said to Mark, why don't you propose a value for those items and submit those to the board for consideration? Is that fair? Is that what we talked about, Mark?
That's correct. Yeah, and I think that the tension, if that's the right term, is some of the comments from the planning board and the Board of Selectmen aren't consistent with what DPW wants to do. And frankly, we just want to get our site plan so we can get our construction schedule rather than get tied up in which project is more important. We're willing to do our fair part of it, but it needs to get resolved, and it's taking
Mark,
some effort to get there.
Well,
and we're still
I think
not
we're also going to hold them responsible for explaining what their position is and why, so that we can understand why we would put one item over another, even though the select board may have recommended something, the ultimate resolution might be putting something else in front that, that this board feels is more urgent. But, I'd want to hear their explanation, and it sounds like they're not ready to do that formally yet. So
So I assume a representative will be at the next meeting.
Yeah, the only other comment I would make is if streetlights are on the public way, they should be procured by the town and installed by the town and maintained by the town. I don't understand how we would ask a private property owner to purchase equipment, install it on a public right-of-way.
Well, I think it's more
If it's on the, if it's part of the town's infrastructure.
more to light the intersection where the applicant owns property on both sides of the street, has.
Right, I'm talking
crossing
about the
street
physical
regularly.
placement of the lights. The applicant should be interested in the safety of their residents when they're there. If the lights are on their property, they should pay for them and install them, done. Hard stop. I don't really know why we're here. If the lights are on the street and are part of the town's street infrastructure, and that's what the need is for, then the applicant's offer to, fund the purchase through town procurement.
Well, one of the reasons I think we're sort of stuck on this is we've not heard from DPW on this. So, until we know
What you said, let's
why
get from DPW.
why there's been a,
So I think we're spending a lot of time on this, and we all agree that we need to hear from DPW, and we should move that along. If DPW could be ready at our next meeting, or even circulate something ahead of our next meeting, a letter of recommendation on this issue, so that we can move this forward and get a draft decision put together.
I have one sort of, it's not particular to this, but it is as far as Spectrum's operations go. One of the things I've noticed, and I've heard comments from other people, is that when your clients finish the program and leave, we seem to find them hitchhiking along Oak Street to try to get to public transportation of some sort, and I just quite frankly have a question as to how you deal with clients when they finish with the program and are going home, because it seems to me that it's not safe for the clients or for the community, people driving along that street, to have people hitchhiking along away from your facility. So I know this has nothing to do with the site plan, but I would just like some answers on how you're dealing with that.
We'll bring an answer to the next meeting.
I would appreciate that, because it just doesn't seem to be in the best thing for the town to have these clients hitchhiking along the streets there to get back somewhere.
Just so the record's clear, but I'll investigate it. We'll come back with a report, but that's not acknowledging that it even happens. So,
Right, I know, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions or outstanding issues that we need to?
The applicant is requesting a continuance of the hearing. Mark, can you read this into the record for me? I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Can't read it.
You can read the start of it.
On behalf of Spectrum Health Systems, Inc., correspondence shall serve as a request to continue site plan approval on the project at 151-155 Oak Street to June 7th, 2022. It's executed by me as attorney for Health Spectrum.
Great. Thank you. Would you like a motion, Mark, on that?
Sure, whoever's ready.
Okay, I move that the planning board continue the public hearing for site plan review application. I'm sorry, wait a minute. Yeah. of Spectrum Health at 151-155 Oak Street to Tuesday, June 7th at 6:30 as requested by the applicant.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion of the motion? All those in favor? All right, we'll see you on June 7th. Thank you, Mark. All right, next item on the agenda,
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
continuation of the public hearing for the site plan review application of 2529 Research Drive. And Marshall, again, name and title for the record and introduce whoever's speaking tonight.
Mr. Chairman, while he's setting up, perhaps I could just introduce the parties that may be speaking
Please.
this evening. So first of all, Marshall Gould from Gould and Ettenberg in Worcester, representing Samuels and Associates. And with me from Samuels and Associates, sitting down over here, we have Peter Sugarides, who's the principal of Samuels. Sitting next to me is Mike Fitzpatrick, who will be doing the majority of the presentation. He's the Senior VP of Development for Samuels and Associates. Sitting next to Peter over here is Brian McCarthy. He's our civil engineer from R.J. O'Connell. And we also have behind him, we have two parties, Scott Thornton on the aisle. You have probably seen him before. He's a traffic engineer for us from Vanessa and Associates. And next to him, we have Jeff Heidelberg from Beals and Thomas, who is our wetlands and survey engineering firm. And lastly, behind me, I saved the best for last. We have Hillary Buskirk. She's with the landscape architectural team of MDLA. I'm not sure that everybody will be speaking tonight, but I want you to know who the parties are in case they do end up speaking or answering questions. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mike Fitzpatrick, and he'll give you the overview and then more detail of what we're looking to do.
Great. Thank you, Marshall. Thank you, Chairman of the board, members of the board, all those that are in attendance tonight. Just thrilled to be here and continue the discussions on the redevelopment of 25 and 29 Research Drive. I did want to pause for a minute, just tell a little bit more about Samuels and Associates, who we are and what we do. We are a Boston-based full-service real estate development company. We really focus and pride ourselves on complex mixed-use projects. So we have really transformed and built the area around Fenway. Several larger mixed-use buildings there. And we really pride ourselves in working with communities and building communities and engagement, and then it leads to successful development projects. So the plan right now is I have, it's actually a pretty lengthy presentation, so if at any point in time you want me to speed up, or if you want to pause at any point for a particular item or questions, just let me know. I want to start with an overview, then run through a quick zoning summary, and then spend the bulk of the time going through the engineering design review and transportation review, and then turn it over for Q&A. So first, wanted to start, just orient everybody with the property. I know everyone probably drives by it pretty frequently, so we're talking about two parcels, 25 Research Drive, which currently houses the BJ's corporate headquarters. So that's located up front, directly on Research Drive. And then 29 Research Drive, which it's actually almost a horseshoe around 25 Research Drive, and it's to the south or backside of the site. Either side, the west and east, are commercial developments, and to the south, behind the site, it's the Sudbury Valley Trustees conservation land, and they do have a trail network in the back. So collectively, 25 and 29 Research Drive combined, it's about 68 acres of land. It does abut directly Research Drive, which has a direct connection to Route 9, and then shortly up the street, a connection to 495. And so we're looking at a redevelopment plan where we'd be creating a state-of-the-art innovation campus. And so this innovation campus will house, again, a mixture of uses. So it will be a combination of life science, research and development, GMP manufacturing, office and amenity space. The GMP manufacturing, or good manufacturing practice manufacturing, it's a type of manufacturing that's highly regulated because of the type of work that's being done and the medicines that are being developed. So both the creation of medicines and gene therapies in a very highly controlled environment, and it has to meet certain standards before it, while it's being made and when it leaves the facility. So it's just a highly regulated, very specialty type building and construction that would allow for the right tenants to come in and work in that space and develop these medicines and gene therapies. So we looked at this site and we had some goals that we set. It's an interesting site. There's a lot of natural features that are very nice features by way of the topography and the wooded areas that surround the site. So we looked at how do we leverage those elements that exist, how do we create a campus that we can look at a place that people can come, they can work and be inspired, and have spaces that they can truly sit and be collaborative and really research and develop the items that we're talking about. So it's about creating an environment and a place that has connections between the buildings and the uses that will be occupying that space, including access to some amenity space that would be common to those tenants of the development, and some outdoor amenity space associated with that as well. But creating an environment that people can come and really be energized and feel good and work together and collaborate in this space and create these amazing things that are, especially now, at the forefront of a lot of what's in the news. There's certainly a piece of this that will be well-being based, and so we're looking at how we create areas within the space that would have fitness, offer other types of well-being with whether it's yoga and meditation, and then some other amenity spaces that are sprinkled within to create this nice environment. So I thought it'd be worthwhile to run through just general timeline and the work that's occurred to date. First, want to acknowledge the town officials and staff, and since day one when we started conversations, which was back in September of 2021, I'd say every step of the way, the town has been very supportive and very responsive, and eager to set up and have meetings with us and continue to discuss what we would be coming forward with and presenting for the development. So we started those conversations back in September of 2021. The date that I have up is wrong for the next one, but we did have a pre-filing meeting and a sit down with Fred Leonardo and the fire department. That was October of 2021. And then we had the pre-file one-stop meeting, which was a great meeting where all the departments got together. We had the opportunity to sit down and review a condensed version of the presentation that we have now, and an opportunity for everybody to first see what we were proposing. Then we had our select board meeting and conservation commission meetings on April 12th. There was some good outcome of the conservation meeting, and that we had some comments that were provided at the meeting that we then were able to take and spend some time and do some additional work that informs what we're going to be presenting tonight. We also had met and decided that we would continue those hearings to tonight, and for conservation, actually pushing it out into June so that we could do some additional work and provide some additional technical information. As part of this, we did have the opportunity to meet with Sudbury Valley trustees and talk about the trail network to the south of the site. We do have a meeting that's scheduled, this is a little out of order, but that's scheduled tomorrow actually to meet again with both SVT, Sudbury Valley trustees, and the Westborough Community Land Trust to again discuss the opportunity for a connection to the trail network that's to the south of the site. We have engaged and had several meetings with both DPW and engineering. So we have been working through with them water and sewer for the project, and we continue to do so. We have some other meetings that are being set up now so that we can advance that side of it. And now we're up to a point that we're here tonight presenting the overall project as well as some additional materials by way of what we learned when we went out and did the supplemental testing that informed the design. And also, we did receive peer review letters. So we have the engineering peer review that was provided by Ty and Bond, and then also the transportation peer review that was provided by MDM. So we have those. We have had the opportunity to talk with DPW engineering and Ty and Bond. And we have actually submitted today a response letter to what we had received, and we have some supplemental materials that we will be following up with. So I wanted to just run through quickly what we've already done to date, just so everybody has that in the background as we go through and talk to the balance of the project. So now getting to some of the fun slides and talking about the overall development, and the key thing here, and you see it well, is that we have a piece of land, a sizable piece of land that has some very interesting natural features, and our thought is let's embrace those and look at how we look at what's there currently and how we expand it in a way that makes sense and fits in with that surrounding just natural features. So if you see the wood line that goes into the center of the site, there's actually a tall knoll there that is a lot of topography, so there's a lot of ledge on the site. So from that wooded knoll in the beginning down towards what's labeled as Building 3, there's between an 80 and 100-foot difference in elevation. So that's something that certainly has come into play as we've looked at the development of this property. We do have wetland resource areas around the perimeter of the site, as well as a vernal pool that we are taking into account as we lay out the site and move forward with the design. So we're looking at coming in, doing a complete demolition of what currently exists on site, and then starting from ground up. So we would be installing all the infrastructure and all the utilities to support the development, building new driveways, associated sidewalks, parking areas, landscape, hardscape, and all the features that we'd want to have at a campus like this. And then building three new buildings that would be mixed-use buildings that would house the uses that I had mentioned, that total 705,000 square feet. And then we also have up on the really centrally located 10,000 square foot building, I am pointing to it, to those that can see it, that would house an amenity space. It's going to be a common amenity building for the tenants of the development. It would house the fitness and well-being and those types of amenities for all that would be here. You'll see also that we are maintaining some areas for some open detention basins that are part of the stormwater system that we'll walk the group through. And then certainly going to be having a nice program of both landscape and hardscape throughout, that we're going to have a section that we run through what the proposed landscape and hardscape would be. So with that said, I'm going to move on to, this is intended to show the massing and siting of the buildings. It's not intended to show the architecture. We still have a lot of work to do on the architecture piece of this, but given the prominence of this location, the fact that fronts on Research Drive is highly visible, we're looking at the entrance to the site as really as the gateway to this campus. So a lot of time is going into what we want to emphasize as you approach the site and as you enter the site, and really go into this innovation campus. So this is a preliminary perspective to give a sense of what it would be approaching and then entering the site. So now we spend a few minutes talking through the project benefits. So certainly there's buildings that exist on site that are old buildings. They were built in the early 60s. So they're not to a point that you'd want to see for bringing in even new office tenants at this point. So the buildings themselves are older buildings. The infrastructure on site is also dated. There's several other things that just are in various states of repair that need some work. So this would, by way of the redevelopment with the new buildings and the overall program, certainly be a big opportunity for additional tax revenue to come into the town. Also with this, there comes a wide range of jobs. So when you hear GMP manufacturing, it's not all people with PhDs that are working in these facilities. It's actually a range of people that work, so you can work, and there's good, solid jobs for those with bachelor's degrees, associate's degrees, and PhDs. So there's a wide range of jobs that would come online as part of this. Again, we're looking at how we maintain and preserve a lot of the natural features. And one of the big elements that we'll spend a good chunk of time on, and some comments that came actually when we were before the Conservation Commission that further elevated the review on the drainage, is the drainage design. So right now, this site has very little, it does have some drainage components, but it does not have a full system where you're collecting it and treating it prior to discharge. And in some cases, there's areas that are directly flowing into the wetlands. So we will walk you through the stormwater system design, and it's a significant improvement to really the quality of the surrounding resource areas. Again, we're evaluating the connection for a connection to the trail network that exists. Look forward to meeting tomorrow and going through that further. We also are looking at having EV-ready parking spaces at each of the buildings. So we would be locating those adjacent to the entrance to the buildings, and we'd be looking at the amount and the demand of EV vehicles, and then we would, from that, install a certain amount of EV parking, but they would be set up as EV-ready. And with this new construction and new buildings, we have the benefit of, some is driven by code, but we do have the ability to build buildings that have efficient and different materials for the building envelopes. We look at the types of systems in these buildings that are also had advanced significantly from the 60s, but again, highly efficient in looking at different sustainable elements that we would layer into this. We are looking at how we can reduce the water consumption, and then also looking at how we could potentially reuse some of the gray water so that we can recycle it, rather than both consuming it in some cases, also not discharging a portion of it to the sewer. So we're looking at that all collectively as part of the sustainability for the project. So wanted to talk a little bit more detail about, I won't go too crazy, the existing site. This is just a good representation of, and if you can see the very tightly spaced contour lines, you can get a sense of what we're dealing with for topography, and in particular the knoll, that wooded knoll that is in the middle of the site. So that's where we have between 80 and 100 feet between that area and then the 29 Research Drive property to the south. We have a handful of buildings. These are, so up front, the orangish colored blocks are the buildings themselves. So on the BJ side, there's 3 office buildings and then a satellite utility building that houses their central plant for the buildings. And then the 4 buildings to the back are all part of Triborough Crane. So on the front side, on the BJ side, we have the buildings and the parking lots. The parking lots are in different states of repair, and again, they do not have all of your typical best management practices that go into today's standard for a stormwater system design. And then in the back, we have a combination of paved areas, gravel surfaces, and then an operation where there is staging and storing, and then moving of equipment with large cranes. And then also, last thing to highlight on this slide, and you can see it well in the dark green areas. The dark green areas are the wetland resource areas. So for each of those, we're looking at the buffer areas, the work that we'd be doing in those areas, and how we can preserve and enhance, in some cases, the wetland resource areas. So to get into a little more detail on the full proposed site plan. So starting with, and again, from the plan that's up on the screen, you can see it's really a full ground-up construction. So starting with the entrance to the site, we'd be holding the entrance location, but we would be modifying the geometry in the drive and creating a space that would have both the appropriate widths and geometry for the roadway, but then the sidewalks, and creating a safe environment for both vehicles and pedestrians. So that would be from the existing entrance on Research Drive through the site and then come all the way back to Building 3. And then off of that drive, we would have for each of the buildings separate circulation and access for both deliveries, employees, and anyone from the outside that would be coming in and visiting. There is dedicated loading areas on each of the buildings. So if you look at the back area, in this case of Building 2, there is a dedicated loading dock. We did look at how we site the buildings so that we could have that in a place that's either behind or screened, and we looked at additional screening so that, in particular on Research Drive, we have a thick screen along this edge that further screens the truck dock. But we did look at how we could set it back so we can further take it away from the street. One thing to note here, right now there's one exit in and one entrance and one exit at the site. We are looking at putting in a supplemental emergency gated access. Some of this came by way of discussions with the fire department. So we will be adding a connection up here so that there could be another way out to Research Drive. So again, going by building 1, we have full circulation around the building. We have dedicated loading. There will be parking spaces surrounding, and then where we have right now the preliminary location of the entrance, we would have both accessible parking, and we'd identify some electric vehicle ready parking spaces. So those would be located such that they're up against the building and they're close to the entrance to the building. We do have a central parking field in the middle here, primarily supporting Building 1, our amenity building in the back. So this amenity building, again, has a space that's outside. We still need to develop and program what that space would be, but it would be an outdoor amenity space for those that work on the campus. And similarly on Building 3, again, we have full access around the buildings. We did provide enough width in that so we can accommodate the various vehicles that would be here, and certainly looked at emergency vehicles and how they would enter and then circulate around the buildings and have a safe space to navigate. Get used to my buttons on the mouse. So, yeah, I'm not going to get into the landscape. We actually have a separate section on landscape design. So that's a little more detail on the pro site. We will talk more detail when we get into the stormwater design and the utility design. So I want to take a couple minutes and run through the zoning high level. So again, we have the 2 parcels of land, 68 acres in total. They are both zoned general industrial district, the IB district, and there is the industrial D overlay ID district. So we are looking at this as the industrial overlay district. So with that in mind, we do comply with all the dimensional requirements that have been set. So we comply with both frontage and all the setbacks by quite a bit. We actually have a detailed table in the plan set that was submitted. And then we wanted to highlight on the maximum lot coverage, 60% is allowed. We're only proposing 17%. Some of that is utilizing and working with the natural features and preserving some of those wooded areas. We are required to have 40% open space. We're actually providing 57% open space. And then on the building height, in the ID zone, you can go up to 95 feet. We're only looking at a 50-foot high building, or really the 3 main buildings that would be the 50 feet high. And then on the parking side of the equation, we did run through and evaluate and used all the appropriate ratios based on the town's requirements. And we are, again, complying with zoning and providing a total of 1,415 spaces. Generally, that's a 2 per 1,000, but you can look at the backup and it's broken down to equate to the office research development parking requirements and then the industrial parking requirements based on employees per shift. That is, right now on site, I think there's 1,045 spaces approximately. So there is a increase in the overall parking. And then we did have, we layered into this, and this was also in the package that was submitted, and we had some discussions early on about how we could submit the, an optional parking deck as part of this. So we looked at how could we layer in a parking deck in a way that the engineering review could all be done collectively, and it could be something that gets done in the future. So we're showing on this slide the central location that we could add a parking deck. It would be over the existing parking lot, so we're not looking at adding impervious. And we have coordinated the design so that, for example, we can install and connect oil water separators for the parking garage, and then the balance of the design in the utilities and the drainage are all set up so that they can accommodate the parking garage. So this really is, for us, when we go out and we're actively leasing these buildings and trying to bring in the right tenants, it provides flexibility. Should we need to provide some additional parking, we can, and we're going to be exceeding the town's parking requirements. Now we're going to get into the engineering design review in a bit more detail. So I want to actually ask Brian McCarthy from R.J. O'Connell to come up and join me.
Good evening, Brian McCarthy with R.J. O'Connell and Associates, the civil engineers for the project. So I know Mike touched on the stormwater management system, a brief overview. What I want to do is just to go over the system, the stormwater management system with you. And I wanted to start with the existing conditions on the site. This slide here shows some pictures of that existing conditions, and the existing system today, excuse me, today is an old antiquated system of catch basins and pipe networks that are not installed or functioning per current standards. They've been there since the 60s, 1960s, so they're really old and really outdated. Several areas of the site discharge directly to the wetlands resource areas and without any water quality treatment prior to that discharge. Actually, some of the runoff from the site actually sheet flows across paved areas and gravel areas directly into the wetlands. Some of these discharge locations lack erosion control devices and flow dissipators. So you can see some erosion that would occur out there today. These deficiencies in the existing system will be addressed, fully addressed and corrected with the new stormwater management system.
I think these pictures really highlight the fact that there are these connections that are discharging directly, whether it's down a slope, directly next to it. You know, it's going to be that high velocity water that's just dumping out, and then the fact that some of this too, you've got, whether it's the sands and other things in the parking lots, plus any sort of floatables and oil that get on the surface would also be potentially going. And then because there isn't your typical curbing in a lot of locations where it can stop and collect the water, it's also potentially going on. So it's a good example of a pretty common situation that happens around the site in the perimeter.
So, so this slide outlines the key benefits and features of the new stormwater management system. And it's a completely new system. Everything on the site will be replaced with the new stormwater management system. And it's designed in compliance with the Massachusetts DEP Stormwater Handbook and the Town of Westborough Stormwater Management and Erosion Control Bylaw. The stormwater management design includes the use of best management practices to mitigate the stormwater flow and to deal with the, to mitigate peak flow from the site, peak stormwater runoff, and also provide water quality treatment and provide a significant amount of groundwater recharge. That doesn't exist today. To accomplish this, we have a list of devices as shown on this slide, and they include deep sump catch basins with oil trap hoods, water quality treatment structures that include a proprietary systems of hydrodynamic flow dissipators, and there's in the subsurface systems, there will be isolator rows, they're called, that provide water quality treatment in those subsurface systems. We also have included grass line conveyance swale in one location of the site. We also have included water quality treatment swales for treatment of that stormwater. And throughout the site, for the stormwater treatment and mitigation, we have subsurface detention and infiltration basins, and we have several surface area detention and infiltration basins. And so the design of the system basically amounts to reducing the peak flow of runoff from the site and providing significantly better, significantly more water quality treatment, as none exists out there today. This plan is the overall stormwater management plan for the project. The pipe network is highlighted in blue lines here, and the subsurface detention systems are the blue rectangle areas, and the lighter green areas are the surface detention basins. So the system is designed, the design of this system is based on an analysis and study of the existing drainage system that's out there today. And it takes into account the amount of impervious area, the amount of open space that's out there today compared to the proposed project. It also takes into account the current runoff locations and where the water is flowing to today. And there are several of those locations. They include 2 connections out to Research Drive, and then several locations to the on-site wetlands. So we got stormwater flows to various locations throughout the site. The proposed project, as I mentioned, will include numerous basins, as shown on this plan. There'll be the total of 4.
If you want to highlight anything, you can use the mouse.
There'll be a total of 4 surface basins in the lighter green. And there's one out in front here of building 2. And then there's 3 subsurface infiltration systems located in the blue rectangles. These are sited throughout the site to maintain and replicate the existing drainage pattern. So we're kind of matching what's happening out there today. We did complete soil testing on the site in order to evaluate the soil conditions and get groundwater elevations to facilitate the design of the system. The basin locations are spread throughout the site.
Excuse me, I just want to add a little bit to the test pit work that we have done. So we had an initial amount of test pits that we completed. In some cases, we couldn't get them exactly where we wanted because there was something in the way, and it didn't allow for us to get in those key locations. So we since, and this is part of the discussions with conservation, we did go back out. We've actually increased the amount of test pits. I think it was by 16 or 17.
17, yes.
And so we now have 3 test pits in each of the basin locations and the underground infiltration systems. And it allowed us to confirm what we had classified the soils as, both the hydrologic group of the soil and the texture of the soil, and then a handful of other describing factors that would help in understanding how the system would function. So that's now being layered into the adjusted stormwater design. So there's a couple of very good things that came out of that process. We did identify a couple areas that we had to slightly adjust the size of the basin because of what we found. And then we also had one area that we had to remove some materials so that we know that the system will function as we need it to function and infiltrate into the ground. The other benefit is that the supplemental tests were done during the seasonal high groundwater period where the prior ones were not. So we also have that benefiting us to get a true understanding of where the groundwater sits in relation to the bottom of the system and how the system's going to function. Back to you.
Okay, thanks. So the basin locations are spread out throughout the site also allow for groundwater recharge to also be spread throughout the site, as opposed to locating basins in 1 or 2 locations and concentrating that recharge. So we're spreading that recharge of groundwater throughout the site. And this design actually provides significantly more groundwater recharge than required by the DEP standards.
utilities.
Okay, so this plan shows the overall utility layout for the project. And basically, all the existing utilities on the site will be replaced with new infrastructure. That includes the new water system, new sewer system, a new electric and gas provided throughout the site. The new water system will connect to the existing municipal system in several locations, including at Research Drive and also to the existing 20-inch water main that runs along the western portion of the site on the bottom of this plan. That 20-inch main comes from the water tank that's adjacent to the town's water tank that's adjacent to the site. The system will be looped throughout the site, and there'll be hydrants, fire hydrants will be located right throughout the site and spaced in accordance with the fire department requirements. The new sewer service will connect to the existing location. The existing sewer actually connects to the system in Research Drive at the main driveway. And the new system will connect at that location, and we'll have a new piped system throughout the site to each of the buildings. And that new sewer system will also include grease traps as required at each of the buildings. The design as proposed will comply with the Westborough standards and requirements. And then the new gas and electric will be provided through the site, and we are coordinating and working with Eversource Gas and National Grid Electric on those services.
So I think just to be mindful of time, and we can speed up a little bit more if we're pressed for time, and then to shortcut some of the utility discussion. So off of that main spine going down the road, we actually have going to each of the buildings your typical utility service connections. So we would have all that running from the main back to, in some cases, near the loading area, but that would be the full utility and infrastructure setup. So now, Brian, you can step out. So Hillary's going to join me. She's with Michael D'Angelo Landscape Architects, and then she's going to run through the overall landscape design.
Hello. So our planting approach is to have a variety of 8 different street trees within different zones, so consistent with it within each zone. We have 3 zones along the main drive, and then each parking lot has its own type of street tree, and this helps prevent monoculture. We're also proposing evergreen screening along the storage area and loading dock of Building 2. And we are also proposing ornamental understory plantings along the building facades. Our plant palette is majority native and also drought and salt resistant. And we're proposing a flowering meadow mix where there are steeper slopes, as well as a low maintenance mix for the stormwater basins and the bioswales. There are 118 parking trees required, and we're proposing 170. And we're also meeting the street tree requirement, spacing our trees at 35 feet on center. And we're proposing a total of 359 trees. And here you can see the variety of street trees that we're proposing. And then those are, at the top, our proposed multi-stem ornamental trees, and also the mix of evergreen trees that we're proposing. And then this represents some of the plantings at the building facades. We're focused on year-round interest, so the dogwood and the winterberry provide really good winter interest. The evergreen shrubs provide year-round interest. And then we also have flowering shrubs, perennials, and ornamental grasses. Here's our lighting plan. We're proposing a more decorative fixture along the main drive, and then a more standard shoebox fixture at the parking lots, and at the buildings. They are all LED and dark sky compliant, and there's no spillage beyond the property line. And all of the fixtures have a mounting height at 20 feet.
Great, thank you, Hillary. So now we're going to jump on to transportation design review. So I'd ask Scott Thornton from Vanessa Associates to come up and join me.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Scott Thornton with Vanessa Associates. Pleased to be here in front of you again. So we prepared a traffic study consistent with state and local guidelines. We looked at 7 intersections in close proximity to the site that we would expect to experience the impact of the additional project traffic. The graphic in front of you indicates the site location, and those intersections that were studied were rotated, obviously, 90 degrees from the site plan. But you can see that we've got the intersections of the Route 9 westbound ramps with Computer Drive, Connector Road with Research Drive with the Route 9 eastbound ramps, Freiburg Parkway with Research Drive, the site driveway intersection with Research Drive, and then down to the south, we've got the intersection of Flanders Road with Connector Road and 2 future locations or future intersection locations with 129 and 133 Flanders Road, and the proposed extension of the West Park Drive that is proposed as a condition of the, or as a project associated with Westborough Office Park. In terms of traffic volumes, base information, we collected the traffic counts for this study in January of 2022. We applied seasonal correction factors of 16% and then also applied COVID adjustment factors between 41 and 37% on a peak hour basis. We've seen traffic volumes start to return to pre-pandemic conditions, but they're not quite there yet. This slide shows the area traffic volumes just for some context to what's there currently. And again, these are all 2021 volumes that are pulled from the Mass DOT record system. Obviously, Route 9 carries about 51,000 vehicles per day. Route 495 carries about 86,000 vehicles per day. And Flanders Road and Connector Road are obviously much lower, carrying about 6,400 to 6,500 vehicles per day. In terms of the traffic study itself, we looked at existing conditions, including crash data, vehicle speeds, and sight distances for the site driveway intersection onto Research Drive. For future conditions, we also looked at background development, any roadway projects, and any other development that is approved but not yet constructed in the area. So the next slide shows the net new site trip generation. And what we did for this analysis was to look at what the current site generates on the critical time periods, weekday morning and weekday evening peak hours. And then we applied some trip generation calculations for the proposed site. And because the GMP use is a relatively new use, there's no specific data for ITE. So what we're doing is really treating the uses that are integrated in a GMP development as discrete uses. So you may have an employee that goes from the office facility to the manufacturing facility to the lab facility, and that's one employee. But the way we estimated the trips, we estimated them as if they were in different silos. So you had office employees and warehouse employees, or manufacturing employees and lab employees. It's a conservative treatment, an estimate of the trip generation. But anyway, we applied those trip generation estimates for the proposed site to the existing site trips, came up with the net new trips expected to be generated by the development works out to be 238 additional trips during the morning peak hour, 275 trips during the evening peak hour. And we distributed those trips out onto the study area network. So what we're expecting is that there's likely to be more trips. It's shown on the next slide. But we expect to have more trips coming from regional locations such as Route 9, 495, and the Mass Pike, really due to the proximity of the site to Route 9, the close and easy access to the ramp system and to Route 9 and then to 495, with lesser amounts of traffic expected to use the local roadways on Flanders Road, both to the west to get into the center of town and then also to the east to head out to locations in Southborough. So we did the impact analysis to identify the relative impact of the project with the net new traffic generation. What we found was really just 2 locations where there was a significant decrease in operations due to the project. Those were at the intersection of Research Drive with the Route 9 eastbound ramps and also the Research Drive intersection with Connector Road. And those are shown on the next slide. What we're anticipating is that we can address those decreases in operations with optimization of signal timing. In both cases, it's a westbound traffic movement that gets affected. It's during the evening time period when traffic is exiting the site. And we anticipate that by reallocating some green time with those traffic signals, we can return the overall operations to the intersections back to a no-build condition. So in terms of project mitigation, there's the optimization at these 2 locations. There's also a proposed TDM program to address the ways to get people out of commuting by themselves, single occupancy vehicle trips. So the applicant is committed to providing a transportation coordinator with information on commuting options, which could include a rideshare program for carpools, providing amenities to discourage the off-site trips, and also providing pedestrian and bicycle accommodations on site. We did receive comments from MDM, from the traffic consultant. There's a lot of information that they have requested. We have reached out to the Westborough Police Department for some details on crash reports, and they are working. We got word today that they are working on that request. But we anticipate a full response to the MDM comments probably in the next couple of weeks. So other than that, turn it back over to Mike.
Great, thank you, Scott. So that concludes the presentation portion of it. So we're gonna stop here and turn it back over to the board for Q&A. And if Marshall, you could join me again.
All right, who wants to start?
I'll start.
Go ahead, Hazel.
It's usual. Okay. I didn't see any presentation, any discussion about any use of solar panels for electricity or anything like that with this particular project. And one of the things I was particularly interested in is I know that there have been buildings that have been using solar panels over parking areas, which seems to be you've got a large parking area you've got there, and it seemed to be a fairly efficient use of putting solar panels in there. So, as I said, I saw no discussion about the use of solar panels as far as electricity goes. I wonder if you could address that.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for bringing that up. I should have spoke to that. So we have looked at the overall site and opportunities for solar, for creating areas on the buildings and the roofs of the buildings that would be PV ready. We are in a parallel path to local permitting. We're going through state permitting in the MEPA process. Part of that also looks at where we could introduce other solar and PV-ready components. So we're very early in the design of the buildings, but we do have rooftop areas that we are setting aside such that we could implement the solar panels on the roofs. We have not taken a hard look at the parking areas and the potential use for PV and solar in the parking areas. It's something that we will continue to look at overall as far as how we're going to approach that. But it is part of the overall project, part of the design. We will be working through that in a lot more detail on the MEPA side, and then I'm glad to share more information and work through it more with the town and the board.
Okay. And I guess my other concern on this project is sewer capacity.
Ours too. So we have, and again, we spent a good amount of time already with DPW and engineering, as well as some other town officials. We do know that there is a capacity issue right now at the treatment plant. So our takeaway, we came in, we submitted, we were looking for a certain amount of sewer flow. We were told loud and clear that the town isn't yet able to commit to that amount, and that we have to collectively look at how we might revisit some of the elements of what we're proposing for building systems and design that could have a reduction in flow. And there's other tools out there right now for how we could potentially identify some additional opportunity where we can create more capacity at the treatment plant. So it is, I'm going to say, early on, in that we have had maybe 2 or 3 meetings. We actually have another meeting that's set up for the end of this week, with the goal that we can get back from the town a better understanding of the current status of what is known for allocations in available sewer. There is a study that, and I'm sure you've heard from DPW and engineering, but there is a study that's now underway. So the town engaged an outside consultant and is running through and looking at the overall sewer system. But we're fully aware that there is a treatment capacity challenge, and we're working through it with the town, and that's top of our list to figure out as well.
All right, I think that's one of my main concerns, mainly because there is a limited capacity, obviously, which our sewer system is able to take, or the town sewer system is able to take, and at the same time, I think the planning board has to be aware of the fact that we can't let one planned building or our project come in and use a majority of what we have as availability in the sewer plan, because we have to look at the whole town, and there may be other industries or other types of projects that might also want to use some of the sewer. So it's kind of a balancing thing the planning board really has to look at as to how we allocate what we have, is, which really, quite frankly, is quite a limited amount of sewer capacity left in our system.
Good point.
Okay, those are my
Pete, I'm sorry.
2 things.
Do you have anything else?
Those were my 2.
Pete, did you have anything?
Yeah, I just think we should make sure that we have a traffic look back to make sure that we, like a 6-month to a year look back, just to make sure how it's impacting the traffic once the project goes in.
I think that's a good point too.
You spoke about sustainability in the buildings. Will these be LEED certified buildings?
They will be LEED certifiable. So we are a lot of current code almost puts you in a position that you're going to be certifiable up to a certain standard. So we are setting it up that we have the ability to be LEED certifiable. And then at some point in time, we determine if we actually want to go for the certification, but the buildings would function and be designed at that level.
The way the zoning, the overlays are written, they have to build to certifiability, but they don't actually have to get the certification unless they choose to, because I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm curious about energy use. You touched on it, in terms of design, but given the life science objective and potential manufacturing, do you allot for a greater need for energy? I'm more familiar with data centers, which are much heavier users, but need to allot, as we talk about water and sewer, just about energy use overall.
Yep. So we've spent a lot of time. We're working with National Grid on what's currently providing the site with electricity, and what would be needed in the future. But part of this, again, going back to how we look at the building design, how we look at this as an efficient building and what we implement for the building envelope and the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems, because they're all going to come into play of how efficient the overall building is.
Sure.
So we certainly have, I mean, if you compare it to what's there now to what we'd be proposing, right, it's all the different envelope components that create this efficient envelope. And then on the mechanical side, we're looking at a combination of systems so that we can select some that are, again, more energy efficient. I mean, we want to obviously keep the electrical usage down, and then just overall, it's a more efficient building and will be a long-term benefit operationally. So that's part of the building design, and so we're going to be very carefully selecting all the building systems with that in mind.
I had a question on the traffic, and maybe we could back up to that slide. And Scott,
which slide would you like? I could pull it up.
Let's go back to the first traffic slide, I think, to start. Next one. Okay. So I found it interesting that westbound traffic was 10,000 trips less a day than eastbound. And I'm just wondering, I'm just not sure why that is. And if you have any theories to that, or because it seems like everybody going east has to go back, well, not everybody, but most of the eastbound traffic would eventually return to along the same route.
I would agree. This is the it's data that has been collected by DOT, and there are spot counts in those locations. And it could be that, it's not usually that marked of a difference. I mean, even 495, there's a discrepancy.
Yeah, but it's much, given the volume.
Much less, right.
Much less, yeah.
Right. So I don't really have a good explanation for you. It could be, I'm sure if you look at the time periods, at the morning and the evening commuting peak periods, there's probably more of a reversal, a more even reversal of the traffic pattern. So you may have, say 2,000 cars eastbound in the morning and 500 westbound in the morning, and then in the evening time period that might flip. I didn't look at that specific issue. I just tried to provide some context for what's there.
So that being said, I think if we go forward a couple of slides, you said that most of the trips, 55%, would be westbound traffic, right?
Yep.
Am I reading that right? And so currently from Research Drive eastbound to 495, there's a dedicated lane to get on to 495, and there isn't a dedicated lane westbound. You actually come off of 495, you have to merge down to two lanes, right, and then get back onto computer. I'm just wondering, and again, I'm not suggesting that this project triggers that threshold, but I'm wondering what triggers the need for that dedicated lane, and is it because the eastbound has so many more trips that there's a dedicated lane in that direction, but not in the westbound?
Yeah, so I think, in terms of the distribution, that's really based on journey to work census data and where people work, where they live and where they work. So that's, there's expected to be more people along the 495 belt along and east. So that's why there's a heavier westbound bias. In terms of the configuration of the ramp of the lanes on Route 9, I think that predates all of us.
Might be
right?
way outside the scope of your studies.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
put you on the spot with that, Scott. I just found it interesting that I'm just curious what the threshold would be to add that, to provide that for the, yeah, Jim, do you have?
Sorry, Scott. That's fine. Just for the board's consideration, you have your peer reviewer here from MDM, and I would ask that you allow him to present before, because he may answer your questions.
That makes sense too. Okay.
Yeah, and I was just, sorry, Jim, I was just going to say that that is a question that the peer reviewer raised regarding the lanes and on Route 9, and that's one of the things we'll be looking at.
So then I guess my last question, I don't know if it's for you or for Michael, as far as making use of the commuter rail in town and either dedicated van service, will the facility have any kind of commuter rail connection, whether it be dedicated to the actual facility or in conjunction with the Via ride share that we have already, and what is the proposed or expected trips or strain on that service?
Yeah, I think that's still a work in progress as to what the actual mitigation winds up being with as it pertains to the to any type of commuter rail connection. I know that there was a shuttle bus that ran out to the office park that was discontinued, and there's no plans to bring that
currently
back.
the Via ride share does dedicated trips.
Yes.
And I'm just curious to know if that's been factored in, or whether there'll need to be additional trips as a result of this. Again, I'm not sure if it's in your realm of expertise or not, or whether,
Yeah, so I think that we didn't take credit for it, and I think that if we did factor it into the traffic analysis, you would have a reduction in trips, because otherwise those people would be driving, their cars most likely by themselves to the site. If they come by way of the commuter rail and then a potential shuttle bus connection, you may have 3 or 4 people in that one van trip.
Yeah, and I guess I'm more interested in trying to make use of that service as much as possible to reduce the number of trips. So whether it be, I know businesses in town that provide a van specifically for their employees that is outside the Via ride share, or whether whether there's some type of additional vans necessary as a result of this. Or again, it's just one thought that crossed my mind is, how do we encourage whether the eventual tenants will be doing some advertising saying, okay, instead of driving to work, you can take the train to Westborough and use the public transportation option. Again, it's something I'd like to encourage in town to reduce number of trips.
Yep.
Something for the applicant to respond to.
I'm not sure if you're even aware of the Via ride share or the ability to commute to the train station and get to work. And I just want to encourage that use, and whether it be through some type of promotional campaign or, maybe you need to get some more information on that before you can respond. But.
Okay, I was going to suggest, because we haven't had a chance to fully review the comments I gave you from MDM and put together a comprehensive response, and then we can layer into that this as well.
So why don't we get MDM up to discuss their response, and then see if you have any responses ready for their response, or but go ahead.
Thanks, Scott.
Do you want us to move, or?
No, stay there, because we may need your comments. Go ahead, name and title for the record.
Dan Dumais with MDM Transportation, Senior Project Manager. We completed our letter May 18th, went through all of Vanessa's traffic study, as well as reviewing the preliminary site plan set, as well as the Section 61 finding for the adjacent West Park Drive. I'll just quickly go through our comments and give you kind of a quick overview. Let me start with the two that you brought up, the TDM program on that shuttle with the VIA program. We had suggested that they look at maybe reimbursing employees for use of that shuttle. or coming up with their own shuttle that could be shared within area developments as well. So that was one. In terms of the auxiliary lane on Route 9 between 495 and the Computer Drive, I believe that's a requirement of the West Park Drive at a certain build out. So as part of this project, when they go through the MIPA and Mass DOT process, they're going to need to sort out if they hit any thresholds that would require some of that mitigation prior to the West Park Drive being built out. Because in the retiming of the Research Drive, Computer Drive ramp systems that they're looking at retiming are also part of mitigation as part of the West Park Drive when they hit certain thresholds. So it's kind of working out who gets there first. Is it this project? Is it that project? We believe that'll be worked out through Mass DOT and MIPA, but the town should be aware of it. So our first comment was the study intersections were appropriate. As part of Mass DOT, the ramp merge diverge areas are likely to be required to be added by Mass DOT as part of scoping. So they'll probably add those in. So those will be reviewed by Mass DOT. We did note that the West Park Drive, as well as the other Tech Drive, Computer Drive, office buildings are very vacant out there. So just want to make sure that they've added in the background West Park Drive, kind of full build out of that project in the analysis, or are they assuming that that wouldn't be constructed? That was one question we had in the background. They've requested local police crash records as indicated, so we'll be looking further into that detail. We're hoping that they can come up with collision diagrams and short-term safety measures to improve safety at the Research Drive, Computer Drive ramp area as part of this project, kind of low-cost, short-term. They'll have to reduce those with Mass DOT's discretion and try to really reduce the angle type of crashes out there, sideswipe type collisions at these two intersections. The site distances at the intersections appear appropriate, so we're just asking that they add those sight lines to the plans with notes to maintain the sight lines and snow height and snow drifts. Again, public transportation one, we talked about the VIA service. So we're asking them as part of their TDM program to kind of reimburse employees to use and incentivize that program. The future traffic growth, they looked at a 7-year projection, 1% per year, permanent background projects in the area, which is appropriate. We just wanted to make sure that they've looked at the 1.75 million square feet of the West Park Drive as part of the build out. So just need clarification on that. And then again, the West Park Drive build out at I think additional 327,000 square feet above where they are today is going to hit threshold of Mass DOT for improvements. So we just want to make sure that the mitigation commitments wouldn't need to go and be put in place as part of this project if this project was to go before that one, or what if the 327 is built and then this project gets built on top of that. We just want to make sure that the town would be covered through Mass DOT for proper mitigation. I think the trip generation and distribution was generally appropriate. We just want to make sure that there's a monitoring program in place. For example, if this use is kind of a new use, so if there's a larger build out of R&D and office versus assumed manufacturing warehouse other use, it could be a significant increase in trips. We just want to make sure that as part of the Mass DOT and the future Section 61 finding for this project, that is documented and properly monitored so that it could come back for further review if required. If it's a significant build out, probably above 10% of what's projected in the overall build out of the project. We just want to make sure when they go through the Mass DOT permitting process as well as the local review that they consider all the complete streets initiatives. Could be sharrows on the site along Research Drive connecting to the other bikeways as well as the connections in the back to walkways as well as the future B-Walt trail connections. We've requested that they look at the 85th percentile in average peak parking from ITE and come up with a relative justification for the parking that they're requiring, and then land bank any spaces, which they'll be required to do anyway through MIPA. We just want to provide an adequate number of parking, don't want it to be overparked. Just want to make sure that generally the ITE is kind of the standard, just make sure it's following the general outline through the town zoning guidelines, which it appears that they do satisfy. The last comment we had was based on the TDM program. We're just looking at additional measures that they should include to promote non-single occupancy vehicles out there, designated drop-off pickup areas, again, for the VIA shuttle, subsidy programs to support that use, guaranteed ride programs, car sharing, EV-ready spaces, as well as EV expandability for the future, spaces close to the door for car sharing, ride share programs between different employees, some sharrows and stuff on site to promote bikes, bike parking, potentially a bike share program where they could have a couple bikes at each of the buildings, helmets in different sizes or a unisize for employees to use, get around the campus as well as within the area in the neighborhood. Maybe the trails in the back could be a mountain bike or something. And then on-site amenities, which they're proposing, just expand as much as possible to include like fitness centers, showers, lockers. So people use alternate transportation such as biking. You have somewhere to shower before going to work. You get a bike at lunch, go for a run. You have a place to accommodate that. Cafeterias, mailboxes, maybe like a mobile dry cleaning services that kind of come in and probably service the other areas on Computer Drive, Research Drive already. The post-Rmc monitoring, which I had mentioned, looking at potential countermeasures if there's outcomes that they're 10%, above 10% of what they had projected. We had a couple of minor comments on the site plan, which looks like they're starting to address. Mark the carpool EV charging bike rack locations kind of on the site plan. And then clarify if the walking trail in the back to the Memorial Reservation, if that's intended, if there's any spaces there for the public use, or if it's going to be employee-driven only, and kind of incorporate sharrows and connections to the B-Walt through shared markings on site as well as along Research Drive. I'd be happy to answer any questions. That's kind of a quick, speedy overview. Vanessa is going to respond to our comments, hopefully address a lot of the, we'll go back and forth with them at the board's discretion. Happy to answer anything else you may have.
Questions? Very good. All right. I think that's good. We'll wait to hear their responses and see if anything comes up. Okay. All right. I think that's everybody's questions so far. Did you have anything you wanted to respond to there from the peer reviewer, or are you going to hold off and what?
Side, we'll hold in, unless there's anything, Scott, you feel that you should?
Yeah, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I just want to, okay.
Pull together a response package and submit it to.
Jim, what other considerations? We're going to extend this to the 28th? You're not going to be ready for the 7th, are you? Okay. I mean, we can extend it through the 28th, and if you're ready, we can get you on the agenda, but, okay.
You have a motion to that. You can fill in the date.
All right. Who wants to do that?
I move that the planning board continue the public hearing for site plan.
I'm sorry, can we pause for a second,
Sure.
though? It is a public hearing. Is there anyone here from the public that wishes to address this? Okay. No.
Sorry.
All right. Sorry about that, Hazel. Go ahead, make the motion.
I know it. I move the planning board continue the public hearing for the site plan review application of 25-29 Research Drive to Tuesday, June 28 at 6:30 p.m. as requested by the applicant.
Second that.
Thank you.
Through the chair, if our engineers for both civil and traffic are able to meet and conclude with the peer review engineering and get the results back to you, do we still come in on the 28th, or is there an earlier meeting that you would?
June
we do have a
7th is
meeting
the
on-
next meeting.
Sorry,
June 7th is the next meeting?
Yeah, could
that
we,
is the next
could we,
Okay.
was the motion to June 28th or through?
Through June 28th.
Okay, so if we change that motion to through June 28th, I think that you could theoretically come in on the
Okay.
7th.
And I'll write that letter and give it to Jim.
Hazel, are you okay with that?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Can I just make a comment? I guess I've had a second, so I can make a comment,
Your
I guess, on the
motion.
motion. All right, my concern is there's still a number of outstanding issues, sewer being a main one, and
Agree.
I kind of don't want to look at this as do a piece here and do a piece there and do a piece here, and, you know, if there's, I think we could be more efficient if we were able to, I mean, you may be able to answer the traffic problems, and that might take, 15 minutes of our time. Well, we have these other things that are really more outstanding, and I'd rather see more of a complete presentation covering more of these outstanding issues, which is the reason I'd like to, at least at this point, put it through the 28th.
I'm fine with that, but why don't we do it through, change it, since we're changing it through the 28th.
Yeah, that's fine.
If they can present a compelling reason to get on the agenda for the
Right.
7th, then we can put them on the
Yeah,
agenda.
but as
for
I
the
said, I
7th.
just
It
don't
gives us
want it
some-
done this
It gives us some
piecemeal.
flexibility rather than.
And
if we just
Hazel,
extend
we
it to
agree
the-
with you. We understand, believe me, all of us understand the importance of the sewer. That is something that has to be resolved in some way, and both we and the town are working on it right now. In terms of the rest of the civil engineering and the traffic, the peer review is going to meet with our team, and we'll get the responses back to Jim and to Lisa on both the traffic and on the engineering. And we're working with the town, so Jim will know what's happening on the sewer as we know, and we'll report back by a memo or a letter, and then hopefully by the 28th we'll know a lot more than we know today. And I agree with you. We've got to blanket this in a hearing instead of having multiple hearings for piecemeal.
Yeah, I think just to add to Hazel's point, though, you have a relatively large team, and I don't want to bring them all back on the 7th just to deal with one item. Some of you guys didn't even get to say anything, so.
We respect that, absolutely.
You're probably getting paid to be here, so let's try and minimize your cost for that part of this equation and get everything covered at one future meeting.
Okay.
So that we can deal with other issues on the 7th. But again, if you can give us a good reason why you need to be on the 7th, we'll be happy to put you on that agenda. Anything else? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That's 5-0 of continuing this public hearing through June 28th. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing for the amendment to West Park Drive Extension Definitive Subdivisions Special Permit 2021-1. This is a public hearing, so I have to read the notice into the record. Notice of public hearing, Planning Board, Town of Westborough, amendment to the definitive subdivision plan for an industrial subdivision road connecting West Park Drive to Flanders Road in the Town of Westborough. Pursuant to the rules and regulations governing the subdivision of land, Section 3D of the Town of Westborough and Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 81T, the Westborough Planning Board will hold a public hearing in the Great Hall of the Forbes Building, 45 West Main Street, Westborough, Massachusetts, on Tuesday, May 24th, 2022, at 6:30 p.m. on a plan to amend the definitive subdivision plan entitled Definitive Plan West Park Drive Extension in Westborough, Massachusetts, as prepared by Beals and Thomas Incorporated and dated April 28, 2022, on behalf of West Park 2100 LLC and Caruth Capital LLC. The plans are available for review in the Westborough Planning Board office at 45 West Main Street, Westborough, Massachusetts, and with the Westborough Town Clerk at 34 West Main Street, Westborough, Massachusetts, during normal business hours. Any person interested or wishing to comment should attend the public hearing at the time and place noted above. Westborough Planning Board, and that was in the May 4th and May 11th editions of the Telegram and Gazette. All right, so we did have the applicant in at a previous meeting to give us kind of a summary, but because this is a public hearing, I'm going to ask them to go through that, their proposal for the benefit of the public and to give us a chance to ask any questions. So Mark, name and title and introduce your compatriots. Thanks.
My name is Mark Verreau. I'm with Caruth Capital, 116 Flanders Road, Westborough. This is Dan Feeney from Beals and Thomas, and Scott Thornton, the traffic engineer.
Okay, who wants to take lead on this presentation? Dan, go ahead.
So, Dan Feeney from Beals and Thomas. So when we were last in, we had come through with the amended definitive plan. As you may recall, the original approved definitive plan was an extension of the West Park Drive subdivision roadway from the existing cul-de-sac terminus down to Flanders Road, where a traffic light is proposed. The amended definitive plan changed the section of the roadway north of 2200 West Park Drive building. So it was going to be the same roadway design from Flanders Road for the first approximately 11 or 1200 feet up to the West Park Drive building. But that rather than having a curved roadway that came up and replaced the existing 2200 West Park Drive, the plan was changed to utilize the 2200 West Park driveway basically in its current format with some minor revisions at the connection point to the new section of the roadway, blending that into the boulevard style roadway that exists down by 2200 West Park Drive, but then utilizing that roadway that currently exists as the driveway for 2200 West Park driveway as part of the new street layout. At the May 3rd hearing, we did receive comments. One of the design features of the existing 2200 West Park Drive roadway is a sharp curve that exists to the north of the 2200 West Park Drive building. It's less than the 200-foot horizontal curve requirement within the subdivision rules and regulations in the town of Westborough. And so what was discussed was adding speed bumps in that area, as well as some signage to alert drivers to the sharp curve. So those have been added to the updated plans. A full set of revised plans was submitted on May 12th, or dated May 12th, I think, submitted the following day. So those plans also included updated full lotting plans at the time of the initial amended definitive submission on April 28th. There was lotting plans in there, but not all of the meets and bounds were included in that due to some time limitations on that, as well as full profiles and detail sheets as well. So it's the May 12th definitive subdivision plans are the full set, complete now, with the modifications as well as the additional sheets that weren't part of the original April 28th subdivision set. We also did submit updated stormwater calculations subsequent to the May 12th plan set going in to document the stormwater design at the various design points. I can also just include, we did receive department comments earlier today from a number of different departments. I've had a chance to go through those and are happy to discuss with the board any of the outstanding comments that are out there.
Why don't we start with the board and see if there's questions?
I have none.
I don't have any questions. I mean, when we had a discussion about this, I thought it was a feasible way to resolve the entire project, problems we were having the entire project, to make sure that we didn't end up with a traffic light to nowhere. So I really was in favor of this change, which would allow them to use the existing driveway.
Anything?
I just have a clarification question for Jim. I think this is just a typo that I've noted in the town comments. So this is the intra-communication. The previous applicant, they don't have any role in this project. This is Caruth Capital in the town, correct? Okay. So the memo to all of our town departments just says the applicant is 25 Research Drive Properties, an affiliate of Samuels and Associates. But it's just, yeah, I just wanted to make sure I really didn't miss another chapter here. Yeah.
That was
Yeah, no, it was
probably
all the changes that we talked about last time.
for the
Yeah.
review.
All right.
And I've looked through, I have no questions. Like, comments are all favorable.
John, anything?
What was the timeline on this one again?
Yeah, that was my question. We had talked about a construction schedule on this as part of the, I don't know if, I guess as part of the approval, right? We were, I was expecting that sooner rather than later. I'm just not sure if you're ready to provide that or if you're still working on that.
Sure. Well, we are still working on it, but out of necessity, the construction schedule for Phase 1, which is from Flanders Road to 2200 West Park Drive's Boulevard in front of the building, that pretty much mostly needs to be done simultaneously with the work that A.R. Belli would be doing for the town and Mass Works.
So I guess, that's something I'd like to see before, I don't know, you haven't drafted a decision on it yet, have you? So we would need to instruct Jim to draft a decision. I'd like to see that referenced in the decision and circulated prior to our next meeting, which would be the 7th.
Right.
I would expect something in the decision, some type of time frame, maybe. Again, I think that the town is going to commence work on this, on their end of the project, fairly soon, and I would expect Caruth to coincide rather than having double disruption. In other words, the town do their end of it, finish, and then a year later have Caruth start their end of it. I'd like to see those coincide, and if we're going to make this kind of concession on the road design, I'd like to put some type of time limit on that so that you're encouraged to commence your end of it simultaneously with the town.
Correct.
Does that make sense?
There is, the areas that we have to do simultaneously would be grading, relocating of utilities, things that have to do with having the same topography as the basically the B-Walt Trail is what is really driving us to complete our portion of the work.
Mark, I think we have to, the other thing that I think we're concerned about at this point is that we have the town has a June 15th deadline to sign their contracts, and our next meeting is June 7th, I'm sorry, and we have till June 15th to sign this contract, and we just want to make absolutely sure that things are going to move forward together so that this project gets completed. And we don't want any sort of, we'll start this later on, or we really haven't had a chance to get a contract, or we have to do discussions, and obviously it would be to your benefit to lock this up with a contractor yourself, because prices are only going to go up. And at this point, we've been able to have the contractor that we're dealing with hold their prices to the 15th of June, and I would think you would be interested in trying to do the same kind of things so that you aren't faced with sudden increase in price which you had not expected.
Right. And in some ways, as important as pricing and increasing is availability of contractors and their availability of employees. That's and of materials. We're seeing that across the board being an issue as well.
So I guess back to my point, we're subdivision approvals are usually good for 2 years. You have a pretty lengthy list of waivers here. I'd like to put some type of caveat in the decision saying that those waivers are only good for 3 months unless you come back in and again, 3 months may not be the right number. I need to see your construction schedule. But once you produce that, I'd like to put some type of expectation that those waivers will only be good for a period of time. And if you need those extended, you come back in and explain it so that we understand that, you're acting in good faith to get this project done. That's, again, I'm not skeptical of that. I just want to make sure the town is covered on that.
Yeah, I think 3 months would be fairly short. Jim, you can correct me, but without an extension from the state, this project has to be completed by June 30th, 2023.
Right.
So we would probably do what we have to now and complete the rest of it in probably the next season after that work goes in.
Okay, again, with the construction schedule, that 3 months was just a hypothetical.
Right.
Once I've seen the construction schedule, maybe we can determine which waivers need longer deadlines, I guess. So again, I expect Jim has a better handle on that than I do, so.
Well, when you get to me, I have some questions.
Okay, well, I'm ready for your questions, so go ahead.
Okay. So, Mark, we do need a construction schedule to know that the private work, at least the grading, relocation of utilities, the slopes, the side slopes that coordinate with the private road and the bike trail, the B-Wall path, and the sidewalk, to make sure that the public work is not going to be hanging in the air. We need to be able to know that you're going to do the sub-road work to coordinate with the B-Wall and the MassWorks work.
We will do the road, the work that needs to be done to coordinate with them. And we have 3 bidders looking at it right now, including the town's contractor who won the AR Belli. Okay. Hopefully they can come in and, it's always nice to have one person doing everything. You're not pointing at each other, but price is also very important to us at this point because everything is costing at least double what we thought it would be.
So. Do you have an idea when you're going to hear back from the contractors?
No, but I did call and email AR Belli this afternoon to see where they were with that.
Okay. So in the next week, I'm going to have to draft a decision, and I'll certainly circulate to you and Dan to take a look at. And there'll have to be something in that decision that I will draft for your coordination with the town's work.
Right. But and Chairman, I think 3 months would be too soon. I mean, we already have $900,000 into this, and to have someone be able to pull the rug out.
I threw out the 3 months as a hypothetical. It's not a number I'm, fixated on. I need the construction schedule to determine what the right number is, and willing to listen to your input on that. But, I just want you to understand, I do expect it to be, the whole thing is time sensitive. So, Jim, what else?
So I have to go back to that topic again. So, Mark, I don't know how I'm going to write this if there's not an understanding of the 2 portions of work coordinating. So I'm going to work with the town engineer to put together that language and send it to you. And then you'll either have to react to that or leave it to the board to make a decision by the 7th, because we have to execute the public work with the MassWorks contract before the 15th.
Understood.
Okay.
It may make sense too, after you do have the draft, to have a meeting on that, because we'll have a chance to review it, but then, sometimes things go quicker rather than emails back and forth, just to have even if it's a virtual
Absolutely,
meeting.
I'd welcome that.
We're not going to have a special meeting of the whole board, but if you're talking about a working group.
No, it's talking about work session.
I was.
Town engineer, myself, and the applicant.
I'm sure one or more of us would be happy to participate if you think that's valuable, but I'm sure you guys can work it out as well. Let me know. Put a call out for volunteers. Tim will still be on the board.
Okay. I'm going to ask Joe if he thinks that would be productive. Yes, he's saying yes. So what I'll do is maybe tomorrow, Dan, the three of us, we'll of course include Lisa in that, can look at our schedules, and then I'll send out an email to the board as well.
Great.
All right, what else? Any other questions? It is a public hearing. Anything from the public? All right, we have on a motion? Yep. Mark.
May I bring up the most important thing for Caruth is allowing the use of the existing road that's there to 2200. Having that makes or breaks this entire project. And there are things that we need to be able to, and we talked about this informally last time, is the ability that once we put this road in, that as long as we stay within what the park is permitted for with MEPA and everything, as long as we stay within that as far as traffic or the amount of building, that we won't have to revert to build out phase 2 to straighten out this road. Once we do it, that should be it. And if there ever is a capacity issue caused by maybe a neighbor, or usually those issues can be dealt with having speed bumps or speed limits, and they usually impact intersections and not the road itself, right? So whether the road is 24 feet or 28 feet, and how curved it is.
Yeah. But Mark, I don't know how you expect us to, guarantee that a future use along that road might not trigger road improvements.
Well, as long as we stay within what's already permitted. There's already been traffic studies, it's already been permitted, and what we're doing here doesn't make a lot of sense for us anymore. We cannot build a single square foot more in this park than what we can today, and less than what we could build before the conservation rules changed. And so what we're saying, as long as we stay within what has already been approved by the town and the state and everybody else, since 1980 when this project was developed, that we should be, allowed to have this extension and the B-Wall Trail kind of be our linkage, and we're just doing it up front.
Right.
Also, this park is.
I think we'll have to consider that. That's I'm not sure how to structure that kind of guarantee. That seems.
But wasn't it already done when the park was permitted and when we went through MEPA and all that? I mean, also, this is an extra exit. This park is fully permitted for the exit that already exists onto Route 9. We don't, really, we don't have to do anything. It goes onto a state road, and it's done. So we just, no good deed goes unpunished. We're saying, hey, let's do this, but later on, if we want to build out 2300 West Park Drive, we want to be able to do that without having to spend, a couple $100,000 down the road or something, when probably what we're going to build there in the whole park is less than what we're allowed to. And I understand what you're saying. What happens if things change? And if we go beyond that, then we understand.
But when you came in originally, to build this road to road standards, right, you didn't ask us anything about 2300 to say, well, we want to make sure you're not going to ask us for road improvements when we build out 2300. There was no even mention, well, what if we do 2300? Are you going to ask us to put speed bumps in and spend an extra 200 grand? Right? I mean, there was no, so I don't understand how you can bring it up now and expect us to envision an undetermined use and an undetermined, again, I'd have to hear how that would possibly be something we could.
Well, you are correct that we didn't bring that up, but the planning board didn't bring it up either. And now where we're scratching our head wondering if we should move ahead with this, we're saying, is this going to be it, or is there going to be something else? But it's within what's already, you're saying, well, how can, and you're right, what if later on we exceed what we're permitted for? then by all means, you have every right to say, hey, you changed what you've built here, what you set up for, and you're changing it, you're exceeding that, so we're going to go out to see what you could do to mitigate that. But all we're asking is if we're not exceeding it.
All right, so that's fine.
Yeah.
But when you come in with a new project, right, you build a case as to why what infrastructure that new project would need, and the board makes a decision at that time. We don't make a decision now on what might be needed in the future without knowing what is going in. I just don't, how is that going to?
But you know what's going in.
How can we write that, Jim?
So I distributed a memo that was dated today from Vanessa, and Scott Thornton's here, if he wants to explain that. But it deals on things, it deals with this capacity issue of Research Drive on two levels. First is the MEPA permit, which was for total square footage. Second was trip generation and trips expected from full development of the office park. I think what Mark is saying, and I would agree with what he's saying, that if the total square footage that MEPA permitted Research Drive for is not reached, that there would be no need for improvements to West Park Drive, because West Park Drive was always envisioned to be a cul-de-sac. And there were no exiting trips from West Park Drive when MEPA granted the permit for Research Drive and Connector Road intersections. If there is the extension of West Park Drive, it would only relieve traffic at the intersection of Research Drive and Connector Road, which is why we wanted to build this extension in the beginning. So that's kind of where we're at right now. So Mark is saying, if we don't exceed that square footage and exceed those trips being generated, we shouldn't have to improve West Park Drive because it was never envisioned in the original permit, correct?
Correct.
Correct. Is that correct, Scott? Okay. So if there's some unforeseen use built on, say, 2300 West Park Drive, or 2200, let's say, West Park Drive, that exceeds the build-out and exceeds the trip generated, then I think we have to look at all the intersections, not just West Park Drive, but we have to look at Research Drive and Connector Road. So I think that there's not a disagreement at this point of what the town would want and what they fear. But if it is exceeded in the future, then all bets are off and you have to look at all the roads.
I think that makes sense. I mean, I think that the problem was the discussion we had last time, Mark, was that you were trying to have us give you an opinion or something in a written decision whereby even if there was an increase in the usage over what was permitted, that we would not ask you to do something to that road. But if there's an agreement that you will, if there is nothing that exceeds the present permitted capacity for that particular area, then you would not have to do anything to the road. However, obviously, if there is any increase, then you have to come back, and we're back to square one as far as how we would deal with the roads.
So if I could, I think we should acknowledge this memo, which only further backs up previous memos that Mark has sent us with regard to other projects on West Park Drive, most recently the Mass General Brigham's project. If we introduce this memo to the decision, I think it makes it pretty clear that if they exceed that build out, that's when you would address West Park Drive. As long as they stay within the square footage, they would not need to address it. I think
I would agree with that.
I mean, that gives you, Mark,
okay,
a point at which you would ask them to address it. And based on what the available land is on West Park Drive, I kind of think they're not going to trigger it. At least Caruth wouldn't trigger it. Maybe one of their neighbors might trigger it.
I guess I'm comfortable with that resolution. I saw in Scott's analysis that, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but my understanding is that you feel that that road that they're proposing will be sufficient for that maximum build out. And I just need to hear from, whether it be our engineering or our experts confirming that, and then I'm comfortable with that. I just,
Well,
if you think that's accurate, then.
Respectfully, I don't think you need a peer review.
No, I'm
because
not asking for a peer
the
review.
numbers are the numbers.
I would like engineering's input on that, because I know Lisa had
Sure.
some concerns, and I don't, again, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but.
I'll give you the memo.
And may I address Hazel?
Sure.
What?
You were correct, Hazel, and when we first talked, I implied that it was open-ended, and now we're showing that it isn't open-ended. It's what's...
That's what I was looking for, quite frankly. So I feel much more comfortable now based on the conversation we've had tonight, and I certainly would be willing to support that accordingly.
Okay. I think I understand. I guess I would just like to.
Yeah, just say one more thing about that. I'm sorry, through you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
This memo actually helps us understand what the limitations are for future development. And I think that this memo actually answers your question that you've had all along. It answers mine, but it only came today. So it's not new information. It's just a reminder of what the permits were that we've had in the past. And I think it also gives you a tipping point that you can say if it goes beyond the threshold of 1 million, it's
very specific.
It is very specific.
130,643 square feet.
That's it. Thank you very much. Yes,
Scott's
there it is.
very thorough. I mean, this establishes an objective, very specific objective measure of build out, and we're designing the road today in good faith, both parties, and agreeing to what its size should be. So,
But then I think we need to look back at MDM's comments in the previous hearing and say, well, are we going to put all the onus on the improvements on that one project that exceeds the tipping point? And I think we need to consider that.
Yeah, but I don't think we can consider it until we find out if, I mean, I think we've got to take this one step at a time. And at this point, I'm willing to look at the proposal here in front of us as far as that goes. And I think the town is protected enough by the discussion we've had. And, you can only go so far with these things. You can't string it out forever. So, I'm willing to have
I'm not suggesting that we ask. I'm saying each project provides an incremental increase in that square footage, right?
no. There's a volume that was approved, a total volume, which is yet to be built
Right,
out.
and each project
And the
takes some of that
applicant's
volume.
asking to be protected if they stay within what's already been permitted, that the road we're agreeing on today, they won't be asked to improve it when they choose to build within that limit.
All right, and I guess this is a question more for the other public hearing. Is that 750,000 square
1 million.
feet that
Samuel's
25
project.
that they're building, is that included in this 1 million, or is that a separate allotment?
No.
It's
This is just,
That's West Park Drive.
this extension is just for the park.
Right.
We own everything in the park except 900 West Park Drive, and that's already built. All the available developable space is owned by Caruth Capital. And if we sell it to someone, it's, their due diligence and our owners to make sure they can build.
My only point is if they're using, if another project is using some of that allotment, I want to know. Because I want to know, at some point, we're going to hit that tipping point.
Right. And Caruth would like that to be, after we spend, a couple $1 million on this road, if 25 Research builds a lot of space and they start going through our park using the road that we paid for, then if there's something that gets tipped, it's there on them rather than if we stay within our lane and build what we're allowed to. They're the ones that are, going beyond what they're permitted right now, really, when you think of it, right?
And also, we've asked for, on that project, we just had the discussion about the fact there'd be a follow-up as far as the traffic goes. So, we will be keeping on top of this.
Yeah, I think it might be good to
happens.
do that follow-up after the connection's built.
Right. And there are triggers that you mentioned earlier, and I was listening, there are triggers to add that extra westbound lane from 495 to Computer Drive.
Right.
And I think your consultant said it was 327,000 feet that triggers that, you know, so.
All right, let's
Thought it was 250.
move on. I think we need to move this to the 7th. Jim, do you have what you need, you think, to?
I do, and we're going to work out a meeting because this is going to be priority for me because we've got to make that deadline.
I'll help. I'm around day to day too, if you want.
I will send it to everybody to see who's available. That'll be great.
When would you need the construction timeline by?
I'd like to have it by Friday. Can I get it by Friday? An idea from you about
a construction schedule?
Yeah. Doesn't have to be
general construction schedule or something real specific?
Doesn't have to be top course of the road with granite curb and all that stuff. Doesn't have to be that.
No.
Yeah, we can work with you, Mark. I think.
Yeah, we're talking about grading, utilities, drainage. That's what we're talking
I mean, they're going to tell us what needs to be done simultaneously, right?
I think that would just help for drafting the
It will.
decision.
And that's what we want to meet about anyway. That's the whole point of the meeting.
We can get you that by Friday, Jim.
Okay. Good. Let me give this to Joe.
All right, do we have a motion?
All right, I move, go ahead. Tim, go ahead.
Give me a shot, Hazel. I move the planning board continue the public hearing for the modification to the West Park Drive Extension definitive subdivision plan to Tuesday, June 7th, 2022 at 6:30 as requested by the applicant.
Second.
Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor? That's 5-0. Okay, thank you for coming in. We'll see you
Your time.
on the 7th. All right, next item on the agenda, I believe we have the CMRPC Community Resilience Planning Award that Jim will give us the good news on, I guess. So, Jim, are you ready to speak to that?
Thank you. Sure. Thank you very much. So as you know, I sent an email to all the members of this board letting you know that CMRPC has chosen the town of Westborough to be honored with their Community Resilience Award, and that's directly the work of Sustainable Westborough and the planning board's efforts during the master plan. I had no idea that this award even existed. So it's a great honor, and Tim can speak to the efforts of the Sustainable Westborough Committee, but the CMRPC has asked that the different groups, Sustainable Westborough, the Conservation Commission, the Selectmen, and the Planning Board, send representatives to their annual meeting on June 6th to receive the award at the Public House in Sturbridge. Tim?
Yeah, the only other comment about constituent, it really is the Sustainable Westborough kind of stakeholders that drove the warrant at town meeting to establish the climate action plan.
Right.
So the only other thing they call out in their award is the existence and completion of the climate action plan. And I would say, you know, just that was my entree into town government. All of that preceded the appointment to this board, and the existence of that plan really helped with the master plan, because like our act was together on that level. And then we worked with MAPC a little bit early on website design. So all I would say is that I'd applaud Westborough, because we've done all of the work that we've done to win this award with no consulting revenue. Shrewsbury's spending a couple $100,000 to hire people to write their climate action plan. I think there's some value in the people that came together from the town staff and from the community at large, the experts, to do that. So it was, it's just nice to be recognized. And I think we're going to show the way via this relationship. Being acknowledged by them as an acknowledgement that Westborough is really way ahead of other communities in our neighborhood, so to speak, or in their region, and they're hopeful for others to, to be able to learn from our example a little bit. And I was saying to Pete Dunbeck that the communities to our east, Lexington, Natick, that the constituents of sustainability coordinators there, MAPC, was really helpful to me in the greenhouse gas measurement. So it's sort of like a pay it forward, pass it along. And the award is a symbol to me that they recognize we're a leader and have the opportunity to help surrounding communities. And I would say, being self-interested a little bit, our ability to help surrounding communities will ensure that whatever changes that we make from a planning perspective within Westborough would likely to be complemented by the surrounding communities, so we don't wind up in a situation where we're leading by example and suffering because of it, which I think is a general concern of climate action by communities, that they would somehow do laudable things to try to look out for the environment down the road, and in the process handicap themselves or put themselves at a disadvantage with daily, with current development. So,
but in the same respect, somebody has to take a lead. I mean, there's always a pioneer. I'm not necessarily saying that we have to be Lewis and Clark on this, but I do think that somebody needs to take that leadership role, and I commend Sustainable.
And to add what Tim says, I think that this award, not something we sought, but something that we are being honored with, will help the town acquire funds from the state. And the state is well aware of our role. The governor's office, we know that the Lieutenant Governor Polito has mentioned our leadership in sustainability, even at the awards meeting that was here about 3 weeks ago. She called it out. So if we apply for funding from many of the programs that would support sustainability, I have to believe we have a competitive advantage.
No, it's a good point. I think there's also a sentiment in town in a time of very tight budgets. The question about all of the, quote, local climate action is, how much is this going to cost us? How much does this cost? What's the impact? And part of the benefit of having the brain trust that we have in town study those issues is, I think it protects the taxpayer. I think that as long as we do things that are maintained consistent with the goals of the master plan overall, and that there's good eyes on this, that we are thoughtful, and we have tried to bring, so far we've just brought net revenue to the town, and that's not often caught out, but there's going to be, as the state kind of leads this direction, there is a lot of help being provided, and our position, as Jim makes clear, is really going to well position us for grant money. So,
yeah, and I think it also legitimizes our effort to work with the business community, the development community, in asking for them to install energy efficient technology, whether it's in their building materials or the very simple, what I call low electric vehicle charging stations. I think that legitimizes our ask for that.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, do we have any action to take on this?
No, just to determine, I guess if you haven't already done that, who's going to represent the board?
After we adjourn.
Sure. Okay.
About the dinner.
Absolutely. All right, now, we had an A&R plan on Spring Road.
Yep. So this is a very simple plan, creating 2 lots out of the Evelyn Arnold Trust.
Have you been here before on this property?
You have. There's been several lots broken out over the years. I think this is about the 4th and 5th lot to be broken out. Both lots have adequate frontage along Spring Road. This is a very simple A&R plan.
It's a problem of access, isn't it?
Yeah, so you see that there's a common drive.
Right.
Because one of the lots has wetland across the entire frontage. And our bylaws allow a common drive to serve 2 lots with simple approval through the Department of Public Works for the design of the driveway. More than 2 lots requires a special permit. This would only be for 2 lots.
Okay. I've never seen this before.
This doesn't determine buildability anyway.
Correct. Your only compliance is with zoning for frontage and access.
Any questions on this? Do you want to make a motion on it?
Sure. Move the planning board approve and endorse the A&R entitled Plan of Land in Westborough and Hopkinton, Massachusetts for E. Evelyn Arnold, M.A. Q-Tip Trust, dated March 16, 2022, drawn by Thompson Liston Associates.
Second.
Discussion on that motion? All those in favor? That's 5-0. All right, let's see, we had minutes. Hazel, do you want to do those?
Do we have minutes, Kristen? Oh, yeah.
Selectmen.
I move that we approve the minutes dated April 12th and April 28th. Is it the other day? 26. Has everyone had it? Is there a second to the motion?
I second it.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Did everybody have a chance to review the minutes? Yes. Okay. Mark, you can call the vote.
All those in favor? That's 5-0 in favor. All right. Approving those minutes. I think that's it, Jim. Or we have
I don't know if you have any comments on the Housing Choice Act. There's been still no regulations finalized at the state.
There's really no update on that, so maybe sometime over the summer we'll hear.
I think it's months ahead before they get those regulations worked out.
So if something does come out, we'll let you know. All right, I don't see anything else on the agenda.
I have nothing to add.
Would you like a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's 5-0. Have a great night.
Do we have to sign the